Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Mark Ford, who is Chief Operating Officer at Blue Grace Logistics, and Prasad Galapalli, who is founder and CEO at Trucker Tools. And today we're going to talk about beyond technology, the importance of relationship building. Now, technology tends to hog the spotlight in the logistics industry, certainly, in recent years. But anyone who's been in the industry for a long time understands that relationships with shippers, carriers, and employees matter too. But is that still the case with all of this digital transformation happening in the industry today? Does technology play a role in building these relationships? And is it now part of the value proposition, part of the business case of investing in technology? Well, those are the main questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have Mark and Prasad on the program to share their insights and advice on this topic. So Mark, Prasad, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks, Adrian.
So Mark, let's get started with you. And like I always like to do when we bring on a new guest, before we dive into this topic of, relationships and the importance of relationships in the industry, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are already familiar with Blue Grace Logistics, but in case some folks that are listening in today are not, why don't you tell us a little bit about Blue Grace Logistics, your operations there, and kind of your role there.
Sure. Blue Grace, I mean, as most people do know, and we're foundationally an LTL organization. That's where Blue Grace, the roots came from, was the mode equals LTL. My background is truckload. So, as they started getting more into the managed logistics piece, which will play a role in some of the other questions I'm sure that pop up here, you have to be able to offer full service. And so, the truckload was something that they did pretty much as kind of an add-on, and they wanted to become experts in that. And so that's kind of where I came on board. And, that was the attractive piece of me joining this organization. Is traditionally I was in very large companies, some from the startup through, to large scale. And some of them were acquisitions, but primarily the LTL was kind of an afterthought. It was mostly the focus was truckload. And I think from a standpoint of what made Blue Grace attractive was their foundational piece was something that was a lead for a lot of customers, and then building the truckload was something that I was familiar with. So if you combine those two things together, that was a big reason why I came here. And my duties here are just really kind of building that piece out. I focus on all things building a scalable execution side of the truckload product itself. So if you can't execute on the shipments, you really aren't going to have success in building out something that, a product that somebody wants to actually purchase from you or use you for. And that obviously just doesn't, is not just restricted to the sales apparatus engine, but also the technology that's involved both internally for our internal employees to use and externally for our vendors and carriers to interact with Blue Grace.
Yeah, no, great overview. And certainly, when you look at, all of the, especially today, all of the challenges going on in transportation, truckload, LTL, parcel, ocean, just about every mode has got its unique, challenges with, constraints and as well as rate pressures and so forth. It's got the, that sort of spells out why technology is important to be able to, address those challenges that come up, as efficiently as possible. But it also is, we can make the case that is why relationships are also so important to help everyone navigate, through this environment. So, we often say that, logistics is a people business, right? A relationship business. So I guess to kind of get started with this conversation now, is that still the case despite all of this technology and automation that, logistics service providers and companies like Blue Grace are adopting, and why are relationships still important?
I mean, absolutely, relationships are still important today. However, if you don't have the technology to partner with the relationship, our business is morphed into something that you want to create efficiencies, and carriers are the same way. There's certain things that they don't like to do either. It starts with the relationship, but over time, that relationship can kind of soften if you don't have the supplemental pieces of making their jobs easier too. So, Yeah, absolutely. Relationships and any kind of any sales product that you're in, relationships do matter, and especially in the markets that we're in. It's not to say that we're always going to get the best price from a relationship carrier, but you can get the capacity. Because I think it's also fair that when the markets are driving, whether it's north or south, from a rate perspective, that you pay the carrier a fair rate. And I think the relationships help us keep the capacity in house and at least allow us to have the discussion before we, have to go to the market and use carriers that we don't have a lot of familiarity with. So absolutely. And from what they're looking for in building those relationships is, they're looking for someone that could actually help them fill their network and fill it in a way that they don't have to worry about keeping some of their trucks on the road on consistent type of freight. And I think from our perspective, with that managed logistics product that we have, you can only access that freight through us. And so when carriers understand that, it's a different type of discussion. And I think that that's what carriers look for is we don't just want to deal with companies that operate from a transactional aspect. We want to have some sort of consistency where we know you're going to have this specific type of freight on these days, and we're familiar with where it's picking up and where it's delivering because it's important for them and their driver retention standpoint too. So, the relationship starts with, hey, we have this type of freight, but it also bleeds down into how you operate and how easy it is for you to do business with, and how that helps them and their employees actually interact with a company like Bluegrass.
Yeah, a lot of great, points there. I mean, you talked about, that it's more than just the short term. That's really about thinking more, longer term. You talked about, part of that relationship is, how easy is it to work with you, right? And particularly when, there might be, upswings or downswings in the market, and that's where the rubber meets the road. I think that there's also another dimension to the relationship is even with your employees, right? We talk about make it easier to work with, or make it easier to, execute, these processes, employees have, a role in this too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's when you look at how fragmented our business is, and if you know anyone that's ever been in a 3PL and that's worked on the carrier side of the business, it could become it's a difficult job. And if you don't give your internal, or you don't show your internal employees that you're working on making their jobs more enjoyable, your relationships aren't going to matter because then they're consistently changing, and carriers want consistency. They want to know they have someone on their side. So if you're just focused on the external relationships, but you're not doing anything internally to supplement that and to give your internal people the ability to take advantage of some of those technology or technological resources, then they're going to have a hard time facilitating the relationship on their side. And you really kind of need that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's always been, two schools of thought. You have the Jeff Bezos from Amazon that talks about, obsess over the customer, right? And then you have others, I believe it's Costco, that says, obsess over the employee, and the customer, the customer satisfaction will come along with it, right? So if you've got happy employees, productive employees, it follows that, they will focus on the right things to make it, to make the relationships with the customers, whether it's shippers or as well as the carriers, to be, very productive relationships as well. Prasad, there's another type of relationship that is important as well, and that is the relationship between, technology companies such as yourselves with, customers such as, Bluegrace. I mean, how have these relationships changed over time, and what's needed to build a strong vendor-client relationship?
Adrian, what you brought in as a third angle, right? The relationship between a 3PL and a technology player, right? That is, has become a huge focus in today's world. Now, if you go back a few steps, right? Take decade ago, right? Or more than that. The relationship between a vendor and a 3PL used to be more of a distant relationship, where a vendor would perform two types of tasks. One is either they provide a product either the 3PL would like to buy that or not, right? Or the second part of the relationship was mostly we would do customization as you need. Tell us what you need, we'll just do it, right? It was almost a services based, right? In both these cases, um, there was no real alignment with these two parties together. It was mostly, here is my product, these are the goals. Either you buy that as it is, or here, tell me what you want, I'll build it up, I'll charge you per hour. Right? I don't care what you want me to stand upside down, we'll do it, right? In both these cases, they were running as parallel tracks, not as joint, right? Now, in today's world, that same relationship has become a partnership. The same way that Mark said about his relationship with his employees and carriers, it has become more of a relationship now, where vendors, technology vendors, align with 3PLs more in terms of a give and take. Let's see what you want in the next 2 years. Is this the direction my product needs to go? And kind of like blending it, let your customers 3PLs shape the future of this product. Technology vendor shapes the product, so together they're building it together. It has become more of that collaboration. Call it three-legged race, we can call it any names, right? But that's what they're playing now.
I love that. As you were talking, it reminded me, a good friend of mine, Kate Vitasic from the University of Tennessee. She's done a lot of writing and books on vested relationships, and so I highly recommend her books. But she wrote a blog post several years ago that we republished on Talking Logistics, so I put my spin on it as well. But she kind of gave a new definition for RFP, right? So instead of an RFP being a request for a proposal, an RFP being a request for partnership or a request for partner. And if you kind of adopted that definition, how would that RFP look, right? What things would you look for, or would you list in that RFP, that request for partnership document? And I think, what you just said is aligns with, some of the things that she talked about. We're really thinking a little bit more longer term. You're not thinking about transactionally what you want to do together. You're really, aligning your strategy, aligning your metrics and objectives, together, and your success is their success, and vice versa. So I think what I've been seeing in the industry, and you're right, it's been happening now for a few years, is this movement towards companies really looking at their technology vendors, not as vendors or something to buy something from, but as a partnership. And then what does that mean if they kind of change that perspective when selecting who they want to work with? So Mark, and I know you touched upon this a little bit, but maybe you can expand. I guess the question is, does technology help in building and strengthening relationships with shippers, carriers, and employees? And if so, in what ways?
Well, the basic principle behind being a third-party logistics company, sometimes you're the furthest person away from the data, right? So you rely on the data that you're receiving from the customers. You're relying on the data you receive from the carriers, and really what you're looking for is, how can we access that data and make it easy for you to do business? So, for an example, tracking. So, drivers don't like to be, they don't like to receive tracking calls. Dispatchers don't like to receive tracking calls, but we have to have that data. And so how do you actually go about getting the data, but making it easy and giving carriers the option on how they actually, transmit that data to you? So whether you, have an app, or whether you're API'd into their web portal because they actually have the data there, it's just the options. And usually phone call is the one that they'll give you the most resistance on, because they're busy, they're doing other things. So they don't want, they don't want to be bothered. So, that's an example of kind of one of the things. And then obviously there's, as technology becomes more an inherent skill of kind of the new generation, there are just certain people that want to deal with their transportation partners via technology. There are some people that don't want a lot of human interaction for anything, whether it's booking it, whether it's tracking it, whether it's transmitting their paperwork, whether it's getting paid. They just want to be able to do things on their own terms. And I think that, what we're kind of building most of our technology or designing most of our technology around, or who we're partnering with, is how do we solve those problems for, our people, whether it's a shipper or whether it's a customer or whether it's a carrier. And that's kind of what we're focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to paraphrase a little bit of what I heard you say is, what technology helps to do is kind of eliminate some of that friction, some of that latency that, slows down the interactions, right, and the processes that take place between shippers, carriers, and logistics, service providers. And, the way the relationships are managed today, or there's different levels to it. Part of it is you want as much lights out as possible and human interaction as possible, because the speed of the business is just so quickly, right? I mean, you got to get shipments out. There are deliver by dates that you have to hit and so forth. And if there's a lot of phone calls or manual processing taking place, that just complicates being able to meet those more stringent service requirements, and that can fray relationships if you don't are able to meet that. But on the other hand, we all know that exceptions occur, and that's really where the people should be, focused on, is on those exceptions and managing it, as effectively as possible when the automation is not able, breaks down because of whatever the case might be, right?
You are exactly right. I mean, managing by exception is a perfect, that's a perfect segment into that. That is exactly, back when I first was in this industry, you had to call every carrier, you had to call every dispatch on every single shipment multiple times in the progression of that shipment. And today we can, on at least 50% of our freight, we can manage by, exception, because we have the information readily available. And so that is, that's a perfect way to put it up there. And that's exactly, the benefit of having some of these technology platforms that are available to us.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is, I mean, you're a growing company. Many companies in this industry are growing. The amount of freight out in the industry is growing. It's just impossible to scale your business and scale your operations if you didn't move into this more automated, technology driven, environment. I think that's just just reality in order to be able to, manage your growth, effectively. So Prasad, I mean, as you're, receiving requests for partnerships from technology from prospective customers, I mean, are you seeing relationship building being part of the value proposition or the business case that companies are putting together for the types of solutions that you offer? I mean, is it coming up with conversations that you're having with prospective clients?
So, I like the way you converted RFP into, instead of request for proposals, it's a request for partnerships. One of the key things that we've noticed in the last couple of years and becoming more prominent is when customers like Mark, right, Blue Grace, when we first spoke to Mark, the questions that he asked are completely different compared to, if we were to do this 10, 15 years back, right? It's not where our platform is today, right? It's not where our technology is today. The questions that, leaders like Mark have asked us is, where are you going next? What's on your roadmap? That's the first question that people are asking. The second question that our customers, 3PLs, ask us is, how much of an influence do we have on your roadmap? And they are very, transparent about this. They say, this is your product, you're driving this, right? We're not trying to manage that for you, but we want to see how much of our feedback goes into your roadmap. It is, I mean, this is a day and night difference between where we were 10 years back to where we are today. This is such an immense, I would call it force, let it be the new direction of our industry. But this is the change that we are looking for all these years, right? Our customers, 3PLs and brokers, asking us, how much of an influence do we have on this roadmap? Because you're solving the problems for us. We want to be able to, share our frustration or our direction, our issues with you. The same goes with Mark and I, right? We spoke about a lot of things. He actually helped us shape one of our products. One of his main pet peeves is receiving calls and from various parties, and he said, why can't we solve this problem through broker advantage, right? Likewise, a lot of our customers actually created that product for us. In many ways, when we spoke to the customers, they said, hey, you're solving one part of our freight. Why can't you help us on the other side of it? That is the direction, right? I mean, we should be able to build these products, block by block together to solve the issues of this industry. And that, to me, is the biggest change that we are seeing in today's world compared to 10 years back. And so those vendors and brokers that adopt to this new mindset are the ones that are moving forward, rather than those that are, the old school, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you talk about really the pace of innovation and the ability to participate in that innovation, roadmap and innovation process. And, I remember, yes, you're right. I mean, when I got started in the industry, 20 plus years ago, I mean, one of the biggest frustrations I would always hear from clients of any kind of enterprise software solution was, we've got this idea we got this need for a capability, or we've got a particular issue. We submitted to the enterprise software vendor, and they said, well, it's going to be 6 months to a year before we get our next release out. And, if they weren't a large customer, maybe their input was at the bottom of the list, and maybe it would take a year or two before that feature or that capability, was added. And I think, part of it was just the nature of the architecture of the way technology was developed and released back then. But I think when you're in this environment today, where it's cloud driven, where you're talking about web services and it's architected for the cloud and so forth, the pace of innovation is key. And I can see how that is kind of an important factor, particularly for the logistics industry, which is changing so rapidly. And there are, logistics service providers like, Blue Grace, they're getting, requests or wish lists from their shipper clients as well as their carrier partners. And they're then have to communicate that to you, because say, hey, you know what, this is what our customers are expecting of us. And, we need to, be able to innovate, as rapidly as possible to meet
Yeah.
that.
And Adrian, if I could add one thing to that, it's almost like, we're all running a sprint race, a sprint marathon here, right? It's a never ending thing, but it's really high paced. Like, for 3PLs too, they're competing heavily on how fast they can scale. Shippers are competing, carriers are competing, vendors are competing. So there's almost like no time for us to say, well, let's take a year or 2 years to build this product.
Yeah, you definitely have to take a iterative approach and have an approach that is an ongoing continuous improvement process, as opposed to these very long development cycles. Well, Mark, then as a way to transition, then I mean, what's next for Blue Grace in terms of your digital transformation journey, and how does relationship building fit into the overall strategy, and how can technology partners like Trucker Tools help in that effort?
Yeah, I think what's next is kind of what's current. I think for us, we're building the stuff internally that differentiates us from everyone else. And I think that's what we're focused on. What gives us the biggest value when we say, hey, we need this because it makes us different. And what doesn't make us different? Is there something out there that's suitable that we could integrate with and utilize, something that A, is already further in development, B, Prasad and I talked about this years before we ever started doing business. We've been talking for probably 10 years, and we've only been doing business for a few. And I think the biggest thing that I brought to the table for him was solve the adoption problem for me, and I'll listen to you. Because we've built some really cool stuff in the past that we just assumed everybody would like and use, but the last thing these carriers want is another platform to integrate with. And I think it's kind of like, once I was comfortable with that answer of, you've got enough people using this and you've got enough functionality built into this that I don't need to recreate the wheel. I mean, there's no offense to anyone that's doing this, but document retrieval is not going to differentiate me from anybody else. Tracking for the lack of better is not going to differentiate me. It's expected, and there are plenty of companies that do it well, but it's kind of like, who's using it? And I think that was important for us, and that's what really kind of made us comfortable with going with Trucker Tools per se, is when we basically said, hey, here's the list of companies that we use most frequently. They were able to give us a really good answer on, yeah, we've got a lot, X percentage of these guys already set up. And if not, we will help you kind of onboard them. And so, so for us, from giving from 0% to even just 25%, and then going from 25 to 40 and above was a lot easier to do than I've done in the past. And I think that for us is kind of, build what differentiates you, from the marketplace that's not out there, that's not cool, that's not, something that you can actually show a customer and they're super excited about. And then focus, on finding the other right partners that actually can, integrate with you and, and you can get the value out of that integration.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. I mean, it's kind of creating this ecosystem, right? So there is that, that internal innovation that's important, and it's part of that, what's differentiator. But then who are the right partners to complement and add value to what you're doing internally? And then, in this industry, it's about, scale and adoption, right? So who are those partners that already have that scale and adoption, as you noted, that can, number one, provide that critical mass of data or information or insights that we need to send to our carriers or to our, shipper clients, as well as kind of perhaps create some of these network effects that are, possible out there that can add even, greater value and differentiation, to the business. So as a way to wrap up, I'll stay with you, Mark, and then Prasad, you can close the program down. So Mark, I mean, when it comes to the intersection of technology and building relationships, I mean, what is the biggest lesson learned so far?
For us, it's been, I think, piggybacking off the answer I kind of gave before is, don't build something that you think is cool. Build something that someone really kind of wants to use, whether that's internally or externally, because a happy employee or a happy carrier or a happy driver makes everyone's lives easier. If you are a broker of choice or a 3PL of choice, and if you're a shipper of choice or you're a carrier of choice, it really all comes back to that, hey, do we make your life easier? Because this is not a very, the concept of what we do is not very, it's not very difficult to understand. The actual execution of it is on a consistent basis. And so I think, if you don't take what other people do into account, you're probably not going to, so getting feedback, using people that have adoption, all these kind of things kind of lead to that. Whereas I think in the past, we all just wanted to build everything ourselves and build it the way that we wanted it. And, generally speaking, that doesn't work in today's environment.
Yeah, that's a great point there at the end, is really understanding the perspectives and the, in order to get the buy-in and the adoption that you talked about earlier, right? You really need to understand the perspective of your internal employees that are going to be living and breathing with this technology day in and day out, as well as the partners that you're interfacing with that are going to be tapping into that technology or leveraging that technology, kind of understanding, does it align with their expectations or with the way they want to receive or send that, information as well. Because you're right. I mean, I think if you don't understand those perspectives and alignments, you might be investing in the wrong things that may not, achieve the desired value. Prasad, your thoughts, lessons learned from the intersection of technology and relationship building.
I think I like the way Mark titled his wrap-up thing. Don't just build technology because it's cool, right? I think it applies to vendors too. Don't just build technology because you think it's going to be cool, right? So going beyond technology from a vendor's point is very much important. What I mean by going beyond is, obviously technology has to help your customers, brokers and carriers in this case for us, right? But what other value are you bringing to the table? Not just technology, right? As a vendor, a lot of people get stuck in, hey, I got this technology, But what Mark said earlier was the other part of the equation is adaptability. Who are you bringing to the table? So one of the values for us at Strucker Tools has always been, we focused on the carriers. For many years, we stayed with the carriers first before we even introduced our product to brokers. That has helped us add value beyond technology to our customers. So as a vendor, one of the key things people should look at is, what is your beyond value other than just the base value? The base value comes in as technology. The beyond value comes in the network effect of the carriers, right, for us. So that becomes the true value that we bring to the table for our customers, and which could help us go propel much faster. So that, again, going back to the title of our conversation today is it's all in the relationship world, right? We are helping our carriers and our brokers build that relationship through us, through our platform. You got to stay focused to that. I mean, it's easier to go chase the shiny object, but stay focused with it. So those are my two suggestions as we wrap up. Look for beyond technology. Look for stay focused on what you bring to the table.
Well, a lot of great points. And I think that, like I always like to say, we always manage to scratch the surface on these topics, but I think both of you provided some great insights and perspectives and advice on this. And I guess the main takeaway is that, yes, technology and relationships go hand in hand, and they reinforce, each other. And don't ignore, don't overlook the importance of technology, of relationships in the overall, puzzle of what it takes to succeed in this industry. So with that, Mark and Prasad, again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Trucker Tools website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Mark or Prasad, and you can post a question there, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.